Happy holidays, Aspire community. I just wanted to say, if you're new to the show, welcome. I'm so excited that you're joining me for this Aspire to Lead episode, and I really hope that this resource is going to enhance your leadership journey. If you've been with the Aspire to Lead show for a while, make sure that you're sharing out your favorite episode on social media or providing a rating or review on your favorite podcast platform. As usual, this episode is sponsored by Papa Rob's Coffee, and I'm enjoying one of his amazing blends right now as I'm drinking my second cup of the day. And Rob has some wonderful French roast blends on his website, so make sure you go to paparobscoffee.com, use the code ASPIRE15 and grab your holiday bundles or a subscription to one of his many medium or French roast blends. As we head into the new year, I'll be at the FETC conference in New Orleans, January 25th. So if you are going to be at that conference, I'd love to connect. I'm not only going to be speaking, but I'm also going to have a book signing also there at the FETC conference. So look forward to that, and hopefully I can see many of you. So again, just hit me up on email, joshua@teachbetter.com, or DM me at Joshua_Stamper, and I'd love to connect in any way possible during that wonderful conference. I'm excited about this week's episode, and there was a short delay, of course, from the holidays, but I have Brandon Beck on this week. He is a phenomenal podcaster, author, speaker, and he is going to provide so much wisdom and value in regards to your teaching practices, how to become a leader on your campus or in your district, and then also all of the projects he's got going on with his podcast, his book, and of course the coaching that he does. So stay with us as we dive into these leadership topics. Welcome back, everyone, to Aspire, the Leadership Development Podcast, where we will be discussing the visions, inspirations, and experiences from top educational leaders. My name is Joshua Stamper, and you can connect with me on Twitter or on Instagram at Joshua_Stamper. Aspire listeners, I have a brilliant guest, and I can't wait for you to hear his wonderful story and all that he's got going on in his world. But I had the wonderful opportunity to meet him in person at Teach Better 22. Dr. Brandon Beck, thank you so much for being on the Aspire to Lead podcast.
It's great to be here. I appreciate you having me.
So let's dive into that conference real quick, because I love getting perspective from those who are in attendance, because it's a little bit different for myself, this year especially, because I wasn't really an attendee and podcaster like I had been in 2019. I was behind the scenes kind of running around like a madman, trying to make sure that the show was going on. So, what was your thoughts on Teach Better 22?
It was electric. It was electric. For me, I met a lot of people in Teach Better through my time kind of finding social media through COVID, and I met so many awesome people and heard so many people's stories and sat on so many Twitter chats and talked on people's podcasts and just even had the chance to reach out if I needed a cry for help. But seeing everybody in the same room was awesome. And what was even more awesome, and this is why I say electric, because what was awesome was the fact that everybody there was a badass educator, but also everybody there was just a complete, rock star of a person, meaning they were edupreneurs, so many edupreneurs. There were so many people that were trying to take their message and take it further, or people who've been doing that, people that have been speaking for a long time, just getting into it, so many different levels, but everybody looking to change the game.
Yep.
And to push forward education. And for me, it was a really uplifting experience, coming out of COVID and not having the chance to connect with all of these people, but to be able to connect with them in one space. It was just really an intimate setting, and it was just set up so that there was constant connection and just a lot of high fives, a lot of bro hugs, a lot of hugs. It was just a really rewarding experience. So I highly recommend it for anybody, and I enjoyed it.
That's awesome, man. Well, I'm glad that you had a wonderful experience, and one of the highlights was meeting you in person. So it was so good to see you in Ohio, and I got a chance to learn a little bit about your journey, but I'd love for you to share that with my listeners.
Absolutely. I am currently an 5th grade elementary dual language teacher in Westchester County, New York. I call myself a monolingual bilingual educator. That's because I don't speak another language, but all of my students are in a dual language program, so they all do. And I have kids in my class that range from kids that just came to the country several months ago that are 10, 11 years old to kids that are on an 8th grade level in the 5th grade of reading. So just a wide variety of students. And it's an amazing location in Westchester County. I'm outside New York City, so there's a lot of diversity and it's a really amazing place. That led me to the pandemic. Let's just kind of cut to the chase because I was talking about it a little bit before. That led me to the pandemic where, I found myself during the pandemic kind of flipping through some time that I had and flipping through some files. And one of the files that I had was back from 2017 that I'd been kind of keeping in the back of my mind was this idea of a book, because in 2017, I defended a dissertation and got my doctorate in educational leadership. And kind of on a whim, and people were like, well, are you going to go into administration? Are you going to be a principal? Are you going to be a superintendent? An athletic director? And I just said, well, I'm not really sure right now. I happen to be fortunate to be a professional soccer coach, and I've had that as a kind of side business since I started teaching, because I've always been a coach and a teacher. I'm currently also a high school coach, and I also run soccer programs for over 5,000 kids in the area. So I'm pretty busy from all those aspects. But when COVID hit, I found myself with a little bit more time on my hands and just started writing, and then turned my tune from I'm going to write a book to I'm going to get a book published. And, what happened was I invested in a personal development coach from Tony Robbins. I'm a huge believer in the work of Tony Robbins, Bob Proctor, Jack Canfield, Brene Brown, just to name a few. So many amazing people out there doing amazing work that may not necessarily be in the textbooks that we're learning about in pre-service education. And so just that whole idea of personal development. And as I went through this journey in my doctorate journey and being a teacher in kind of an uncomfortable situation, I teach students. A lot of them speak different languages than me. I don't speak their language, but I find ways to communicate. It's very challenging. I put myself in a challenging situation. And a lot of times that when you put yourself in a challenging situation, you can feel defeated. You can feel, like low self-confidence. And I've gone through that so many times in my career. And when the pandemic hit, I hit that wall. Like so many people. Well, what am I? A virtual teacher, a remote teacher, a hybrid teacher, an in-person teacher? I didn't even know what I was, a clown behind the screen. And so as that happened, I just kind of found myself like hitting walls here and there. And the writing kind of just started pouring out of me. And the writing led to, the book, Unlocking Unlimited Potential, which is a book that basically revolves around the idea of what I believe to be that every single educator's goal is, the ultimate goal is to unlock unlimited potential in all whom they serve. And I know that that's a tall order. And I know that that's virtually impossible. And I know as a leader, I know as a teacher, I know that's impossible to do that with every single person every single day. I know that. The point is that we have to aim high. We have to reach for that high expectation. We have to push ourselves to do whatever it takes as often as we can. And for me, that's what unlocking unlimited potential is. And to me, what it is that's turned into the book, which led to the work, and it's led me to connect with so many different people in so many different ways that I never knew were going to exist. I never knew that what was going to happen next after I wrote the book was that I was going to start not only speaking in schools, but I was also going to start speaking in locker rooms. And I was going to speak to student athletes, and I was going to speak to coaches that were out there coaching different sports, not just soccer, which is my kind of profession, because I am a professional instructor. I am an instructor for the United States Soccer Federation, Go USA. That's kind of always been my goal to kind of always stay involved in my passions. And as these started to meld into the speaking side of it, it just kind of led me down just a really awesome road through connections of people that I've connected with throughout the years, and new people, and being in these spaces and having the opportunity to talk to not only students, but also adults and teachers has just been incredible. So it's been a wild ride.
That's awesome. I want to talk about your book, Unlocking Unlimited Potential, and the why behind it all. So, why did you think that this was so important for this specific message to get out at the time it did?
Yeah, 1,000%. Because when I did my research, I did a lot of research in classrooms with teachers that were teaching English language learners when I first started this in my dissertation work. Because, like I said, I was a teacher teaching students. I didn't know a lot. I didn't know the language. There's a reason. There's a story because I don't know the language, and just kind of the short version is that I was diagnosed at a young age with a learning disability that made it difficult and very complicated for me to have learning a language in my educational career.
Right.
So I didn't have that, I wasn't awarded that opportunity, but I love to travel. I love countries. I love cultures. I love mixing with people. When I was in college, I lived in New Zealand. I studied abroad in New Zealand for 6 months. Like, I love to experience the idea of culture and the connection. And I always felt that it was more important for me to be able to build connections with students than anything, but that was never challenged until I couldn't communicate by word, by language.
Right.
So then it was like, okay, how do I create connections with students that I can't actually speak to? And this was before Google Translate. So, moving into Google Translate, I've like, in having all these tools, like, I found so many different ways. But the thing that got in the way of me being able to solve those problems was me. And so many times, the person who gets in the way of the problems of the classroom, of the leadership, of the school building, of the district, it starts with us.
Mm-hmm.
It starts with looking in the mirror. The journey towards unlocking unlimited potential, it begins with you. And to me, that's, in a nutshell, that's why I wrote this book. I wrote this book for those people that are out there that need that reminder, that need simple exercises. Each step, each chapter ends with something you can do right away. I call them ASIs, action steps for immediate implementation. Like, you can immediately take what I talked about in this chapter, and you can go take it and you can do it in the classroom tomorrow. You can do it with your leadership. You can do it with your staff. You can do it with individuals. And that, to me, is why, I wanted to write a book that people could go back and forth to and be able to use as a tool. And also, it is supported by research. It's not clunked up with research, but it is. The research that's in there are those resources, those different resources that I talk about, those personal development experts, those people that are also, the main gurus of education, the Howard Gardners, the Maslows, and taking that stuff and connecting it to people like John Wooden's pyramid of success. Like, what do you get, like, in all of those pyramids? What do you get whether it's a ladder, whether it's a staircase, whether it's whatever it is, whether it's a giant sticker on the top of a chart? What is it? It's that top thing, that top piece. That moment is that unlocking unlimited potential moment. That's what they're all talking about. And it's, how do we get there? I didn't invent it. I didn't invent the idea. It's nothing out of the ordinary. It's just, this is what I believe that we are called to do. And a lot of times, educators and leaders and people who make wrong decisions along the way find themselves in places where they dig themselves in a hole, and they're not really sure how to get out. And then it starts to turn into a cyclone for all the people around you.
This podcast is a proud member of the Teach Better Podcast Network. Better today, better tomorrow, and the podcast to get you there. You can find out more at teachbetter.com/podcasts. Now let's get back to the episode.
So I want to talk about something that I saw in one of your blogs, which was joy within the journey. It was stated a couple times that it stuck with me, and it's so true. I've lived this in my own life of not really soaking in the trials and tribulations of the journey to move up into an administrative role, and instead, just purely focusing on the end product. And then, when you get to the point of actually obtaining that goal, and maybe I should have soaked in a little bit more than just focusing so much on the future. So why is it important for our listeners here to really focus on the joy of the journey?
Yeah, I think that's such a good question. And it's something that I honestly find myself saying in every single keynote and every single time I'm speaking on a podcast, it always comes up. The phrase always comes up because there are so many moments in our lives. There's so many components of our lives, right? There's financial, there's physical, there's mental, there's your relationships with there's all of these different buckets that we have in our life. And within each bucket, it's once again like an unlocking unlimited potential moment is to try to, to satisfy all those buckets. Finding something that you're excited about, though, when you're working with kids or when you're leading the adults who are working with kids is really important. Like, you got to be fired up. If you're a teacher, yep. if you're a school leader, there's no other way. Because if you're not, then it's just going to have massive effects. Like, it's not going to be a cyclone. It's going to be like a tsunami. It's just one little thing you say because you're upset has just a massive ripple effect, and you don't even see it.
Yep.
You don't even see it. And you don't even hear about it. And you don't even know you made that impact. And finding joy in the journey is so critical. The way I found joy in the journey, and this is where people are going to probably be like, all right, well, this guy, this is why he likes to go to work so much. But for me, I bring my dog to school every single day. So that was part of a chance that I took and a risk that I took through Time for Kids that I read to my students. And I read a Time for Kids magazine to my students, and it was about these dogs all over the United States that go into schools. And of course, I finished reading it, and the students are like, "Oh, Dr. Beck, can we get a dog in the class?" And I'm like, no way we can do that. And of course, stupid me, I brought home the article and I read it to my own kids, who were like 7 and 5 at the time. And they're like, "Daddy, can we get a dog?" I'm like, oh man, now I probably shouldn't have done that. And so I end up reaching out to Time for Kids. I'm like, they send me the name of the organization. I reach out to the organization. Wheels start turning. Superintendents meetings start happening because I'm going to look at a dog like tomorrow. And they told me it was going to take like 3 to 6 months for them to find what I was looking for, because this is an amazing organization, and it's a national organization. It's called Mud Agrees. And it's actually connected to a social emotional learning curriculum. It's actually free. You can download it. You don't need a dog in the classroom to use the curriculum. But what they do is they're partnered with animal shelters all over the United States. And what their goal is to reverse the stereotype on dogs that can complete service. And so by going through them, they have this way about them that they make it work. And they found what I was looking for. And I was looking for a hypoallergenic dog, preferably a puppy, because I didn't want to, teach an old dog new tricks. I didn't want to find out if that was a true statement or not. And they were like, they found a poodle. They were like, "What do you think about a poodle?" And I was like, no way, I don't want a poodle. I'm thinking of the puffy butts and the show dogs. And she's like, "Brandon, they're really great with kids. I think this is a great fit." And I said, all right, let me go, let me talk to my wife, who was not on board. My wife is super clean, and we had a baby. She didn't want a dog. And it was just, that wasn't part of what our plans were. And so one thing led to another. We went and saw the dog and fell in love. And, then we I wrote a grant. We funded some programs. We started a before school mentor program. It exploded. If you go on Twitter and it's pinned to my profile, there's a video that the news did last year about it. It started before the pandemic. It went through the pandemic. It started as mentoring program. It worked as a school service program. The dog works with 100 kids, over 100 kids a day. She works in different classrooms in the school. Other teachers go around. And right now, what we're doing is we're working on finding funding and getting funding to pay to help train dogs with teachers that they have adopted, so that they can take them into our current school district where we are, and building up a process for it. So that long story short answer of how to keep your joy in the journey is find things you love, take a risk on them, and find people around you that'll support it.
All right. So what's that organization one more time, Brendan? Because I've
No
seen
problem.
firsthand animals in the classroom, not a dog per se,
Yeah.
but lizards and other exotic animals that actually I've seen students that have a really difficult time focusing or staying on task or even having anxiety attacks in the classroom. And they have these animals, on them, around them. And it's like a totally different child. And there's a lot of research with that too. And there's power behind service animals. But I would love to get that organization one more time.
It's Mutt-agrees, M-U-T-T, Mutt, just the I, and then Grees,
Awesome.
G-R-E-E-S. And it's partnered with the Yale University's School for the 21st Century, are the people who made the curriculum. So it's attached to Yale University. So that gives it some credit, I think, because I mean, it's Yale. It's a pretty old institution, but I think they've done their homework.
That's awesome.
Actually, yeah. So it's great, and the people at Mutt-agrees are amazing and super supportive. And I will tell you that this program changed my life as an educator, and there's no doubt that it works. Mm-hmm. There's no doubt, because even if it works with one kid, and we all know at least one kid in our lives that really likes a dog.
Oh, yeah.
And now take that dog and put it where kids aren't used to seeing it. And it's in school, which is a place where things are usually like inside a box. And things are usually like really like there's usually things that aren't out of the ordinary in school sometimes, So that one little piece is so amazing. When the dog is in my classroom, the way my students, I have to train them to come into this school. Like the dog doesn't come into school until they have presented it to the principal. And they've presented it because they've researched and explained the why behind it. So the principal has now accepted it so that they can keep going with it. And it turned into like a service project. We're connected to an animal shelter. We've already made over 500 DIY dog toys this year. Wow. One kid wrote a grant. One kid made $500 because she won a contest to be like a mentor at Mutt-agrees. So it's really amazing. And if anybody is interested in learning more about that, please reach out to me about Mutt-agrees, or you can just check them out. I mean, reach out to them on their site. Happy to help out however I can, because it's an awesome organization and it works. Dogs in the classroom, they work. One of the greatest things I had during the pandemic is Mutt-agrees hooked up all of us up with a Zoom call with Caesar Milan, the dog whisperer. It was incredible. He was in his living room. There was like 8 of us on the call, and he's like, "Hey, Brandon, how are you doing? Tell me about your dog." And it was like, whoa. And he just started talking about, and he just started spewing knowledge about the connection of animal emotions and human emotions. And it was just incredible. He's like, "I don't train dogs. I train people."
Yeah.
And it's true. So true.
Yeah, very true.
Rewarding experience.
Very much so. Obviously, what you are doing is not only transforming the lives of your students, but it did make a ripple, right? You made that analogy earlier in a good way, right? And it's impacted your campus, and you were obviously talking to the superintendent, so it's affected your district and hopefully some of the decision-making moving forward. So, a lot of folks talk about just being a teacher, and I'm going to use quotations there because that's really not what it's about. It's about influence over title. So I want to know, as a teacher, how are you making the most influence and making that ripple effect, not only in your classroom, but amongst the campus and the district?
No, listen, I am super fortunate. I'm part of an awesome district. I can't complain. I've had quality leadership around me, or at least I've had leadership around me that I've had a mutual agreement that we've had trust in each other. And I've never really seen the administrators. I mean, maybe in like the early years of my profession, I've been doing it now for 18 years. So right. Maybe the first couple of years I was probably there was a bit of a hierarchy, but I've never seen them above me or me below them. I've always seen us as like colleagues, as equals. You're going to come and do a formal evaluation in my classroom. I'm still going to say to you, "Hey, can you watch for this?" Or, "I'm working on this and it's going to be messy." I mean, like, you can give me a 3, a 2, a 4, a 1. I actually don't even look at the scores. Sure. People say that's the craziest thing. I don't. I actually scroll through. I put the comments in. If they want to talk about scores, I'll talk about scores. But like, I will never, ever sit there and argue a score. So I there's that mutual piece of it. What helped me too, like I said, I went and got my doctorate, and I got a doctorate in educational leadership. And of course, who are all the people I'm in my doctorate? My doctorate coursework was people that were going to aspire to be superintendents and principals and et cetera. So I had a lot of friends and I had a lot of colleagues. I think that helped me out, obviously, and given me some kind of credit, because when we would be in those classes, I was just inspired to speak. I was inspired to talk about, these things that they were talking about and provide my kind of thoughts of what I thought as a leader and as an educator. And so, I think it goes into that part of it too. I think it's really important to find those moments and try to find that, that mutual pathway with your leaders that are in front of you, and just, we're all human, and just try to be more on the human side of it.
For sure. I want to talk about a lot of your projects that are going on, because you are a busy man. You've got the Unlocking Unlimited Potential Stories podcast. I love talking to podcasters and hearing kind of the origin story of these projects. So would you just kind of walk us through, why you started a podcast? And then, of course, for those who are listening, why should they check it out?
After I wrote the book, I just one thing I use a lot in the book, in addition to I don't use a lot of research. I do use it here and there. But one thing I also, when I say research, I'm also talking movies that I watched, and Mr. Miyagi. I've always been interested and use talking about the story.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that I talk about a lot in my work and my keynotes is the idea of where self-confidence comes from. It comes from three things. It comes from your story, your why, and your purpose. And so starting with your story just kept coming at me. I don't know why. I just kept really getting interested in stories. I'm watching movies, I'm watching documentaries, and I'm just keeping notes in my phone. And all of a sudden I'm seeing all of these connections. I just fell in love with people's stories. And so as I'm going into transitioning, 2 years ago, transitioning to taking myself from, being a teacher in a classroom to starting to take that message out and beyond into social spaces and starting to speak and starting to learn about that, I started to say to myself, hey, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start to reach out to people that are out there that are kind of in the same wheelhouse, that are doing the same thing, that are starting to speak, that have been speaking for 30 years, that have been, and I started to just kind of pay attention and see people's stories and see what people were doing out there in social media, and just started reaching out because I wanted to connect with them. I wanted to talk to them. And instead of just having a phone call, I said, hey, let's, I love to have you on my podcast and record it for 30 minutes. And maybe some other people will benefit from listening to us speak. I mean, I've always listened to podcasts. I've always enjoyed listening to podcasts. A couple of my favorites are the Jay Shetty podcast and also Ed Milet's podcast as well. Those are two of my, my go-to podcasts that I listen to on the regular basis. And the idea, I remember I was speaking to Adam Welcome once, and he was just he's like, Brandon, he's like, you don't even need anything fancy. He's like, I can record a podcast on my cell phone. And when he said that, because he's Adam Welcome and he's an awesome guy, and he's obviously, done so well in his speaking career, I kind of was just he's right. What am I waiting for? Just start it. And actually Lindsay Titus reached out to me. She's like, Brandon, I just read your book. She's like, do you want to record an episode? And I was like, you know what? I'm thinking of starting this podcast. Do you want to be my first episode? So our first episode was her and I, and then just kind of started reaching out to people. And it got to the point where I started to really going big, and I watched Netflix Last Chance U basketball, and I was so inspired by Coach John Mosley. Yep. And I reached out to him, and he got back to me, and he was got on my podcast, and I was like, this is incredible. I'm actually talking to this person. And then I went and saw Blue Miracle on Netflix, and then I was like, this story about this orphanage in Cabo San Lucas. I was like, I wonder if I could reach out. And I find the orphanage, and I reach out, and I end up finding the real person that the movie's about. And I was like, this is actually pretty awesome to have a space that I can share these awesome conversations that I'm having, so that I'm not just holding them all to myself.
Yep.
So that was basically that. And then what happened recently, the last I would say over the summer, I got really organized about it. And I was like, I'm going to start releasing it every single week.
Yep.
And so every single week, the podcast released Monday at 7 a.m. with a different guest. And I've had just amazing speakers, amazing people who are in the education, not in education, coaches, and so many awesome people. So it's just been great, to be able to connect. I mean, this is just, it's a great place to be able to do this.
Well, yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I kid because Adam Welcome has influenced several of my guests to create podcasts. So I need to start making a tally mark of how many folks, because Adam's such a great guy and he's always given advice to folks. And yes, I would agree 100%. Folks need to find their niche and be able to share content. And if it's blogging, if it's a podcast, whatever it is that you need, speaking, right? Folks need to do that. So let's talk about some more things that you're working on. You're doing some coaching, some results coaching. So I'd love to learn about that process and what you're doing to support educators.
Yeah. Shout out to Darren Peppard. Him and I started Unlocking Unlimited Potential on the Road to Awesome. Our results coaching journey started, and it has turned into something really interesting. I mean, I have a business background, having a business for the last 20 years, and being able to work from that marketing side, that advertising side, the social media side. In my other business, we have someone who does that now. So that was something that I used to do. So I had the opportunity to work from like the ground up of building, a business with, a large population of people and a lot of different things like trips to Europe and this and that. So I have all these backgrounds in creating, the idea of business. And so that led me to a lot of people started reaching out to me as I was meeting them, and they were asking me for advice, for questions about, how do you do this? How do you create this? How do you create a mailing list? How do you collect email addresses? How do you, build a website? And so like, as I connected with Darren and Darren and I had read his book, he had read my book. We both talk about coaching. We both talk about the experience that coaching had for both of us. And we just connected. We got going. We said, you know what, maybe let's try this thing. Let's, 2 years ago, let's try this and do this. We're going to do this free 4-month course, and we're going to meet with everybody 1 month on Zoom. And, 30 people signed up. All of a sudden we got 30 people in the room. And now here we are, 2 years later, we've been doing it now, and we have clients, we have regular people that we meet with regularly, once a month, twice a month, 4 times a month, people that are going through all different kinds of transitions. But most importantly, they're just all needing some accountability, that third point perspective, that focus. And throughout our coaching journeys and throughout the work that I've always continued to do through the workshops that I do in schools and that I'm doing with educators, this is a lot of the work that I do as well. Just taking one thing and walking through a process of, in 5 to 10 minutes, I can take you through one thing and we can create an actionable plan that you'll be able to implement, and you'll be able to break it down. Because if you focus on that one thing, you'll be able to take it to the next level. And so just helping people focus and just seeing what's happened. We had people who'd never written a book before come on, publish a book, and now become an Amazon bestseller. Like, that's a different level of teaching, that aha moment, that unlocking unlimited potential moment. So it's just been amazing to be able to see people just kind of experience the results.
Right.
And so that's been so rewarding. If I had 1,000 of those clients, I'd be in heaven, right? I would stop everything, because it's the most rewarding work when you're working with, yes, I work with kids, I work with young adults, I work with everybody, but working with, adults that are out there doing similar things, that are out there in the education spaces, seeing them take what they believe to be true and what they've been working on as what they consider their life's work, and finally take that leap to actually package it, to brand it, to put it onto a platform, to put it into a course, is amazing. Mm-hmm. Because that's the stuff we need. And so many people stop themselves because they're like, oh, well, nobody knows who I am, so I'm not going to, be successful. But
Right.
It couldn't be more far from reality, because we're all capable of it. We're all capable of it. There's a process, and there's people out there that can help you. And if you go and get the help, and you go and get the support and the guidance, and you ask questions, or just type in a little thing on Twitter, hey, starting a business, 3 questions or 3 things I should do tomorrow. Watch what happens on Twitter. You'll probably have 470,000 answers.
Yep.
Like there's always strength in numbers out there. So that's kind of, in a nutshell, I really think that that's what I believe to be true about all of that. It's great to be able to do it.
Well, you hooked up with a good guy, man. Darren's a part of the Teach Better Podcast Network now, leaning into leadership podcasts.
We met in person the first time at the Teach Better conference, which is crazy. We had never been in the same room. It's a solid bro hug.
Yeah, it was good to have Darren there and yourself. And yeah, there were so many great connections made at Teach Better 22. And you're not the only one. Mike Earnshaw and Josh Buckley also, they do a podcast together, and they're on the podcast network, and they met for the first time.
Spent a lot of time with those guys.
Yeah.
Those guys are awesome.
They are. So it was pretty fun to experience several of those meetings that were the first time ever seeing them, even though relationships have been going for a long time.
COVID was a strange time, man.
It really was.
It brought a lot of us together and kept a lot of us apart.
Yep, it really did. But it was great to see everyone in person. And I want to talk about some advice for you, bud. So, for those who are aspiring or current leaders, if they could do something tomorrow or next week to enhance their leadership journey, what would you advise them to do?
Ooh, I would advise them to look in the mirror and start with a morning routine. And one morning routine, and takes no effort at all. Before you put your feet on the floor in the morning, the minute you open your eyes and you kind of get your bearings and you get focused, say 5 things that you're grateful for, and mean it, and start there. I believe we have to start from a place of gratitude. John Gordon talks about going on gratitude walks in the morning, where he'll spend 10 to 30 minutes on a walk just thinking about things he's grateful for. And I think that that's pretty incredible. And I love John Gordon's work, and it's amazing.
Yeah, I love the gratitude piece, and I think that's extremely rewarding and probably a good way to start your mindset for the day also. Brandon, I want folks to be able to find you and connect in any way possible. So how can they do that through social media?
Real easy. Everything is Brandon Beck EDU, and my website is brandonbeckedu.com.
That's super simple.
I try to keep it as simple as I can. There's a lot of places. There's a lot of places we got to make up names and usernames for these days.
And a million passwords.
That's one suggestion I have to edupreneurs out there, is try to find a consistent username.
It's true.
Silly Cat 123 is not a good one.
Shoot, I got to change my email now.
I was using you as an example.
Well, Brandon, it's been such a joy not only to meet you in person, but to have this conversation. And like you said about your own podcast, it's wonderful to have these times and these moments, but for others to experience it also. I think a lot of folks are going to get great value from the words that you shared today. And definitely check out Brandon's book, Unlocking Unlimited Potential. Check out his podcast, and of course, connect with him on social media. Add him to your professional learning network as soon as possible. Buddy, I just appreciate you so much, not only for being on the podcast, but for all that you do in education.
Likewise, brother. Great to be on.